Hey team, welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan MSP. So Ukraine War news update, but it's the third part thereof for the 18th of January 2024. Again, I'm sorry there's so much content, and goodness me, look at the number of tabs at the top here. I don't know how my brain is going to cope. I need a rest from talking this stuff, but nonetheless, this is so important, and actually there is so much stuff to talk about because there's a lot going on at the moment, and I feel obliged to communicate that to you. Right, first of all, Secretary of State Blinken, so this is geopolitical stuff. Blinken says he doesn't see even a close prospect of negotiating a long-term ceasefire in Ukraine right now. It's interesting. So that's the American position is ain't going to be a ceasefire anytime soon. Right, so let's part that and then go, okay, if there's not going to be a ceasefire, what are we doing about expediting the end of this conflict for the benefit of those who are morally in the right? Okay, are we doing as much as we can to do that? And that is still a bit of an open question. Right, okay, and now back on with the next piece, which is, this is just to, I'm not going to play you all of what she says, but this is just to remind people of the role that Belarus plays, or the role that Belarusian political entities kind of don't play as much as they would like to play. Ukraine's victory is extremely important to Belarus too. We urge providing Ukraine with everything it needs to prevail. I believe that a democratic Belarus will be the best help for Ukraine. Agreed. We need a robust Belarus strategy to increase pressure and hold the regime accountable. This is Sviatlana Sikhanuskaya. Something like that. I'll just play the beginning of what she says.
I want to remind how the fate of Belarus and Ukraine are intertwined. We in Belarus fully understand that without free Ukraine, there will be no free Belarus. But also without free, independent and European Belarus, there will be constant threat to Ukraine, to our neighbors. Until Lukashenko's regime is in the country, he will be puppet of Russia. Belarus will be balcony to threat our neighbors. So that's why
I love that. The Belarus will be the balcony, just shouting over across the EU and causing trouble and throwing stuff. She talks about the fragility of Lukashenko being this puppet of Putin, but he's been so threatened previously, and he's only kept there by Russia. I mean, he only that last election, he wouldn't be the dictator at the moment if Russia hadn't stepped in and Putin hadn't stepped in. So he's an illegitimate ruler propped up by Putin. And actually Belarus, there'd be a lot of Belarusians that would like Ukraine to prevail, and it would be really important for EU that Ukraine prevails for Belarus as well. So isn't the idea that this Ukraine is just, it's just a war between Ukraine and Russia. There are so many ramifications regionally, and then in a large way in kind of like the geopolitical dynamics in the world, the independence that you might or might not have from the US and from security alliances, etc., etc., etc. There's so many knock-on effects: trade, energy, grain, etc., etc. It is an incredibly important, the most important global event, I think, in the last 50 years. This anyway, Romanian farmers again blocked the crossing point Diakove Halmeu or something on the Ukrainian border, the Ukrainian State Customs Service reports. So that's again flaring up the Romanian border. It keeps going up and down. The same with Ukraine-Poland border. Issues there. Remarkable Ukrainian success over the past few months. Grain sea exports are closing in on pre-war levels. There are some claims that they're higher than pre-war levels, but 4 companies are providing insurance, including at least one British one. Rates have dropped from 7% to 1.25% of cargo value. This is incredibly important, and it means that the price of grain therefore comes down, because those insurance costs will be passed on to the selling of that cargo. Incredibly important for the world, for places like Africa, but for the supply of food. Grain that goes to Africa just doesn't just affect Africa, because that's part of the supply, and it affects the rest of the world, and prices then come down. If you can't supply grain to Africa, it means you don't have enough grain, and that grain therefore goes to somewhere else, like, I don't know, the UK, for example, but it means that supply and demand, there's less of it, so you'll be paying more for it, and et cetera, et cetera. So, no matter where grain goes, it is a global marketplace, and it affects all of us. Right, tensions escalate in the EU as German Green MEP Daniel Freund reveals a move to sue the EU Commission over the controversial 10.2 billion euro unfreezing for Hungary. So this is like, the way I understand this is the EU saying, right, we're going to unfreeze the money we're holding back for Hungary so that we get the vote that you want in terms of Ukraine aid. And this German Green MEP saying, that sucks. I mean, he's doing us over one. We shouldn't be unfreezing that. He doesn't deserve to have that unfreeze. This is not to position, it's not Freund his position himself against Ukraine, but actually against Viktor Orban and the horrible kind of politics that's going on there. Described as a dirty deal with Orban, the resolution faces a crucial vote this Thursday. Be interested to see what goes on there. There's a lot of talk about Orban, the idea there are several solutions as to what might happen. It might be that there's more of a 26-member agreement with Ukraine and leaving Hungary out, but then there are also there's this Finnish derived poll, basically. The Finnish parliamentarian got these signatories together to say that we want to veto Viktor Orban's voting ability, and he's obviously very worried about that. So there's all that going on, but there's a solution that might be that Viktor Orban gets the right to veto it next year on an annual basis. So okay, I'm allowing the 50 billion euro aid package to go through, but when we're halfway through that, or however long that's over, then I get a chance to, no, I'm not too happy now, I'm going to veto it somewhere down the line. So, I mean, that might be a better thing. It's kicking it into the long grass, maybe, but you would then allow, so say it's over 2 years, that's 25 billion gets definitely allowed before you get a chance to veto the next part, etc., etc. There are all these different things going on, different solutions to the 50 billion euro package issue, as well as solutions to the whole kind of problem of Viktor Orban and Hungary. The Ukrainian government has announced it will promote English in Ukraine to boost economic growth and diplomatic ties. The UK will help with this effort, providing additional funding and resources, says Rishi Sunak, the UK's Prime Minister. Interesting. Obviously, English is of benefit to the UK. It's actually to the benefit of the most of the world being an international language, but the more Ukraine can speak English, actually, the more they'll be properly able to integrate with the rest of the world, and that will aid them in economics, in ties, in diplomacy, and all sorts. And the UK can be a part of that, funding English language education in Ukraine, and that's going to benefit the UK, but benefit Ukraine and benefit the world, really. Okay. The UK urges the West to use frozen Russian assets to rebuild Ukraine's economy. We've heard this so many times before, but David Cameron is really championing this at the moment on behalf of the UK, but on behalf of Ukraine. We should be prepared to do some innovative thinking about how we use these resources to help Ukraine. Rich G7 countries have frozen Russian central bank reserves. There's an awful lot of money. There's also money being made off that money, which is also frozen. So you could just plough those profits into Ukraine, for example. Cameron said the moral argument was straightforward and strong. Quote, at the end of the day, Russia is going to have to pay reparations for its illegal invasion. So why not spend some of that money now? And this is very, very strong. It's like, whatever happens, we ain't doing jack with Russia. I mean, this will stay frozen until you agree to pay reparations. So you're going to have to pay reparations at some point, or that you'll never get this money back, right? Okay, if you're going to pay it at some point, let's use it now to pay for the reparations up front. So why not spend some of the money now, he says, rather than wait until the war is over and half of the legal wrangling and have all the legal wrangling about reparations. The Foreign Secretary brushed aside concerns that it could change the way people see financial centres operating and trigger an exodus of national reserves from Western banks. Cameron said he was working very hard on the issue, as is the rest of the G7, and he was confident of progress. Bill Browder, if you don't know who Bill Browder is, go and search him out. Go and watch his TED Talk from 5 years ago, where he said, I think the opening words are, I think it was entitled originally, I'm the most hated, Putin's biggest enemy, or the most hated person Putin has, or something like that. Anyway, how I figured out the Achilles heel of Vladimir Putin, his TEDx Berlin talk is really enlightening. Jessica Arrow's book spends Putin's trolls that I'm still halfway through, spends an awful lot of time talking about Bill Browder. There's so much disinformation that's been thrown out by Russia about him that is outright fabrication. Fascinating person, and he has been on the brunt of the Russian information war. Anyway, Bill Browder, CEO of Hermitage Capital Management and also responsible for the Magnitsky Act, and long-standing Kremlin critic, said the possibility of Donald Trump winning the next US presidential election should spur policymakers to move speedily. Quote, Donald Trump has said he is going to solve the Ukraine crisis in one day, Browder told an event at Ukraine House in Davos on Wednesday. What does that mean? Is he is going to cut off Ukraine from funding? I would argue, putting aside all these niceties, that confiscating the $350 billion is Donald Trump insurance, Browder added. It needs to be done before the US election so that if that were to come to pass, Ukraine could carry on defending itself and win. This is really important. So if Trump gets in and changes things with regard to NATO and Ukraine funding, we've got a pot of money here, $350 billion, that can be put towards assisting Ukraine. That would be aside from what the US decide, but actually needs to be sorted out now, because actually it's going to involve money that is frozen by the US as well. And so, I think most people are going to be in support of that. Even if you ask Donald Trump now, can we use frozen Russian money to help Ukraine? Would probably say yes. People keep asking me, not to slag off Donald Trump, not to say this. It's very difficult not to mention US politics with regard to what's going on in Ukraine now. In fact, we're going to have a big section on that now. So I am going to talk about it, and people keep saying you don't know anything about US politics, or you're so naive about this. But the people that say that are the people that don't like what I say, and the people that do like what I say, who are also American, say I really like what you say on US politics, and you seem to know what you're talking about, at least to this in this respect. And so basically, if you slag me off for US politics, it's basically because you are at the other end of the political spectrum to me. Okay, so I get that. People keep telling me you should respect Trump more, or you should X and Y Trump more. I will not respect Donald Trump, and I'll tell you why. That man has been found guilty in a civil court by a jury for rape, right? He is guilty of sexual assault. Not only that, he's just about to be found guilty of defamation of the person who was a victim of his sexual assault, right? So not only is he guilty of doing that, but he's then guilty of hassling that person after being found guilty of doing that. The man is a terrible human being. I could talk to you about how much he lined his pocket as I talk about this with regard to Putin an awful lot, to a massive degree. But Trump did that with his own hotels and golf courses. That, oh look, I wonder where all the special, the security teams and going to be staying. I wonder where we're going to have all these meetings. Oh, in my hotels, and that's money going into his own pocket from being president. Yeah, I could talk to you about all the legal issues that he has, and I follow them very closely. By the way, if I'm not doing stuff on Ukraine, I'm doing stuff on Trump's legal challenges. I don't like the guy from a personal human point of view, and I don't like him from his political stance as well. I do actually think he's rather vacuous. I think he's an empty vessel that had his head. There's a reason why SNL, back when Trump was POTUS, SNL, Saturday Night Live, had Steve Bannon dressed as the Grim Reaper behind him with his scythe, right? And because I think Trump was an empty vessel that had his head filled with the ideas of people around him. So Steve Bannon, Stephen Miller, and people like that. And I remember, did I write an article on this back in 2016 when he was running for president? He had 5 different views that he had expressed on abortion. He has no views. He says whatever people want him to hear. And the problem is he feels the base at the moment want him to position himself on Ukraine in this particular way, which is what you can see from the rest of the base. So, it is really worrying. Anyway, with regard to David Cameron, he compares the situation in Europe to 1930s and warns against appeasement. To me, he says Ukraine is the absolute number one priority. He answered when the podcast host asked if Russia's invasion of Ukraine was at risk of being forgotten. This is a challenge for our generation escalation. This is like being a foreign minister or a leader in Europe in the 1930s. We have got to not appease Putin. We have got to stand up to the evil that his invasion represents, he said. I think there is a lot of attention on Ukraine, a lot of unity and a lot of purpose, Cameron said. Cameron referenced the continued support from France, Germany and the European Union, as well as Prime Minister Rishi Sunak's visit to Kiev, during which he announced $3.2 billion of military aid package for Ukraine. So this is big rhetoric, and this again feeds into the idea that we are at this inflection point in history, and this is much more important than I think many people recognize. And I think because it's being played against like the southern border in the US is obviously not that important for people who want the border sorted. I just think from an international point of view, it is far more important. And the global scheme of things, you know, historians will be writing in 100 years about this, and they won't be writing in 100 years about that southern border. They'll only be mentioning that in reference to this war. You know, from a global historical point of view and geopolitical point of view, the southern border, I know it's important to some Americans and many Americans, but it's just that aid needs to get to Ukraine. House Speaker Johnson says no deal on a border, and Ukraine aid is currently possible ahead of a meeting in the White House. So even as US President Joe Biden and top congressional leaders from both parties are set to meet on the 17th, the Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson, said the time is not right for a deal on immigration and border issues that could pave the way for approval of new aid to Ukraine. There you go. In fact, when Mike Johnson says this, literally this is Mike Johnson posting an adapted President Biden tweet. He said, "Did only president focus on our sovereignty first? Today, I brought together congressional leaders," says Joe Biden, "to make clear the importance of getting Ukraine what it needs to defend itself from Putin's aggression." Mike Johnson has crossed that out, and instead of getting Ukraine what it needs to defend itself from Putin's aggression, put securing the border. And then failure to act endangers security of the US and the free world. Congress, don't delay, pass my national security supplemental. The time to act is now. You can't see it any clearer than this. Like, he doesn't care about Ukraine's aid. He really doesn't. He cares about one thing, and he cares about that because he's being held at gunpoint by the fringe for fear of being vacated from his position. House Speaker Mike Johnson said a deal on immigration and border issues, which would pave way for approval of new aid to Ukraine, could not be made. And indeed, he then posts this, which is him speaking to Caitlin Collins on CNN here, where he's just expressing that point. And it's just really interesting to see what all the responses to this were below. There are some who are like dead against what he's saying and posting like views actually on what's happened on the border and the lack of action from Republicans. I mean, this is one of those examples. If you want to pause the video, you can read that. It's interesting view. Not one more cent. So here we have someone in Ukraine colours saying not one more cent should go to Ukraine. Stop negotiating with them. We are 100% serious. You're going to have to shut it down. So people want them to shut government down. So it's coming up to this funding crisis. Are they going to shut government down? And people are saying, shut the government down. Don't give aid to Ukraine. No more funding for Ukraine. Secure the border, says Sabrina Smulders. Then I click on people like this and try and wonder who they are. Is this a Russian troll? American woman, conservative but fun patriot, MAGA, loves God, family, fitness, reading, movies, music, and positivity. Positivity. Animal lover, cats rule. Don't DM me. Right. I've said this before. Like, this person has a blue tick. So this person apparently loves fitness, reading, movies, music, and positivity, and is an animal lover and loves family and God. Right. Yet when you look at 100% of what they say, it is political division. Absolute political division. Stuff to do with transgender, stuff to do with etc., LGBT, how Vivek Ramaswamy is amazing, all this kind of like stuff that none of it, absolutely none of it, is positivity, and none of it is stuff to do with what she says she's interested in, how she describes herself, other than maybe conservative there. So all of this other stuff and cats rule, there's none of that stuff on there, and it's a blue tick. So someone's paying Twitter to be able to say and amplify their message more. I've said this before. Like, this person is not who you think they are. This person is probably a Russian troll. And this Russian troll, therefore, is saying no more funding for Ukraine, secure the border. But if you come down and then read as a true American saying, oh, I wonder what Mike Johnson says, and you look at this and it's complete division, but there's a hell of a lot of people singing the praises of Mike Johnson here and saying don't fund Ukraine, then you think these are genuine voices from US conservatives. Actually, are they just Russian trolls? Anyway, it's just a fascinating thread to read down what both sides of the aisle are saying. And I'm sorry, Brian, to say this again. I don't know if you want me to say this, but this is the comment that has probably most hit me in months, actually. Of all the comments I get, thousands of comments, this one, I keep thinking about this. So Brian, who is a committed Republican and a staunch defender of Ukraine, but also a staunch Republican, this makes me so sad, right? So Brian says, I agree with your analysis on US-Ukraine aid. It is partisan now. And my issue is it is now partisan. It's now like, if you're a Democrat, you're for Ukraine. If you're a Republican, you're against Ukraine, broadly speaking. Of course, that's not entirely true. But in terms of what's going on in Congress, it appears to be the case now. It's become a partisan issue, and it utterly shouldn't be. And Reagan Republicans, it shouldn't be anyway. He says, I'm a conservative Republican, getting called names, getting hate-filled commentary from my peers when I dig into debate being pro-Ukraine. The two biggest issues in Iowa were the number one, the border, number two, the economy. Don't discount Iowa as rubes. They trade into, anyway, so on and so forth. It talks about the Iowa primary there, but as a pro-Ukrainian American, I think I'm screwed in my dreams of American aid to Ukraine. This makes me so sad. It makes me so sad that that's the reality of it, and that this issue has become a partisan issue, and people are dying over a partisan issue that absolutely shouldn't be partisan. My goodness, if Reagan was in charge now, right, or Bush was in charge now, all of those Republicans would be for Ukraine aid. If Senator McCain, who became president, and his support for Ukraine was well known, Republicans would not be balking at aid going to Ukraine and would not be leveraging that aid. It's only because Biden's in charge, Democrats are in charge, and it's become a partisan issue. And it bloody shouldn't have done. And I am so angry with this. Anyway, this is my view. My view is that Jamie Raskin should run for president, not Biden.
Chairman, thank you very much. Today, our colleagues are using their first full committee hearing of the year to distract from the depressing reality that they failed to bring forward even a single piece of serious bipartisan legislation, much less a bipartisan bill to improve our immigration system and confront our major challenges on the southern border. The 118th Congress is shaping up to be one of the most unproductive in American history, with only 34 bills signed into law in 2023, a small fraction of the number typically enacted in a year.
This is absolutely true. Like, there's not just an impasse in Congress with regard to Ukraine funding, but Congress is not achieving what it should be achieving because it's become hyper-partisan. So hyper-partisan that this partisan issue is just one of many issues that is not being resolved. Because people are being too intransigent. There seems to be a complete lack of reaching across the aisle. And yes, you can argue about the Democrats not compromising on the border. But as I keep saying, look, this is the analogy I would use, right? Me and Harry, we are neighbours, right? I go to Harry, there's a fire next door or at the front of our houses, and it's moving closer to us. Can you please come and help me put the fire out for both of our benefit? And Harry goes, yeah, only if you pay me $10,000. And I'm like, what? Yeah, I'll put the fire out if you pay me $10,000. Hang on, like, why do I have to pay you $10,000? That's going to damage both our properties. We will both be worse off if we don't do something about that fire. Yeah, I want $10,000. And all the time we are arguing and we're not putting that fire out, that fire gets closer. And eventually that fire burns us down while we're arguing. And then people going, oh, that was my fault. That was JP's fault for not paying him $10,000. But why are you not saying it's his fault for demanding I pay him $10,000 while that's burning down? Why is it my fault and not his fault? And this blame game of saying it's the Democrats' fault for not capitulating and not compromising when it shouldn't have even been anything to do with the border. It was the Republicans that approached that funding package and said, we won't do that unless you do this. Why is there not blame being put on the Republicans there? So Republicans always keep coming to me and say, it's Biden's fault, it's Biden's fault. Biden convenes Congress leaders to push the case for passing Ukraine funding. US President Joe Biden met with congressional leaders to discuss Ukraine and unblocking the USA funding, the White House press service announced. Senate Republican leader Mitch McConnell expects the Senate to consider a bipartisan deal on Ukraine funding and border security next week. The main sticking point is disagreement over Biden's authority to parole migrants at the southern border. I mean, having said all that, I do hope that there is some compromise that is reached so that this does get over the impasse. But it's pretty galling to be held at gunpoint over aid that should be going to Ukraine because people are dying in the bloody trenches there. And Putin is sitting back freaking laughing. Putin is, oh yeah, keep it going. Like, you know, when the biggest fans of the GOP lawmakers, when the biggest fan of Mike Johnson is Vladimir Putin, the dictator, is King John Il, and is Tehran. Right, if they're your biggest fans about what you're doing in Congress, you need to think about whether you're doing the right thing. Sorry, I am ranting today, and I'm going to be pissing off loads of American Republicans. I know I am. But good God, or good cosmos in my case. It's so frustrating. And let's add something to that. Pakistan has launched a retaliatory attack at Iran. Actually, this might be good news for Ukraine in a sense. So what's happened? Well, Iran had launched some strikes inside the Pakistan border on what they saw were Sunni separatist militants, because Iran is Shia Muslim, two different types of Islam. They are Shia Muslims. They don't really like Sunni, which is why it's interesting that they support Hamas when Hamas are Sunni, and then there's this Shia Sunni kind of issues going on, so it's like a marriage of convenience. Anyway, Pakistan have struck Iran back, so they've launched retaliatory strikes against militants in Iran in response to attacks by Tehran that targeted sites within Pakistan's borders, allegedly belonging to a Sunni separatist militant group. A statement by Pakistan's Foreign Office early on Thursday confirmed it had undertaken a series of highly coordinated and specifically targeted precision military strikes against terrorist hideouts in Sistan or Balochistan province of Iran. A number of terrorists were killed during the intelligence-based operation. Right, this is good. It's not good. None of this is good. This is good for Ukraine. I think if Iran start A, needing their weapons, and B, getting diverted in their attention away from helping Russia, Iran appear to be getting quite a lot on their plate now, and they might need more missiles and they might need more drones. If that's the case, then they might say to Russia, actually, no, we need those. On the other hand, Russia are starting to make those, at least the drones themselves, back in Russia. But it might be good news for not getting missiles to Iranian missiles to Russia. So this is kind of what's happened in terms of the Iranian escalation. Pakistan has recalled the ambassador in Tehran, kicks out the Iranian ambassador. Iranian reports on border clashes. The Iranian Revolutionary Guard commander has been killed. China's mediation has failed, according to local media. Unconfirmed reports that the border has been shut. Saudi are mediating, and India has put a statement out backing Iran, because Pakistan and India are fighting over the Kashmir area of India, Pakistan. They are now backing Iran, obviously for that reason, but then, you know, this is further issues because BRICS would then be pitting themselves with Iran even more. So India would then be siding with Iran, which is kind of by proxy siding with Russia. How does that sit? Oh my goodness, this is an absolute show. And so I'm just going to leave you with something random, but something to think about and maybe something to worry about if you are sort of pro-American industry. China has not just doubled the shipbuilding capacity of the US, not triple, not 10 times, which would be phenomenal, 200 times the shipbuilding capacity that the US has. Thanks for watching. Take care. Speak soon. I need a cup of tea. Doorbell's gone.